Chrystal and Joshua Bernard are pastors of their local church, as well as the co-founders of Braveheart Christian Academy, a microschool in Arlington, Texas, and part of the vibrant cluster of microschools and innovative learning models in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area. Chrystal is a former high school mathematics teacher in Texas public schools. She left to run her own CPA firm, which she still manages on the side, while overseeing Braveheart Academy, which she and Joshua launched in the fall of 2021 after homeschooling their children for a time during the COVID pandemic, and realized that so many other families were looking for that sort of individualized, personalized learning model that they were increasingly excited to buy during their homeschooling experience, and wanted to expand that to more and more families throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So they ended up launching Braveheart Christian Academy as a recognized private school in Arlington and bringing in more families from their community. So Chrystal and Joshua Bernard, so happy to have you on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. It's great to be in good company with others who are just leading innovative efforts for our kids.
Yeah, and it was so great to meet you recently and to visit Braveheart, this lovely space that you've created that is part of your church building, but it has this gorgeous renovated classroom space for your students in a micro feel, so kind of mixed age, one-room schoolhouse feel. You have hired educators, some of whom come from public schools throughout Texas, who wanted to have a more personalized learning environment. So I want to get more into some detail about Braveheart, but first let's back up a little bit. Maybe Chrystal, start with you about, why did you go into teaching in the first place? Why did you decide to become a high school mathematics teacher in the Texas public schools? What was that process like for you?
I always enjoyed mentoring kids, of all ages, and even at our church, I've always just had a love for teaching and just giving people wisdom and knowledge that they didn't have. And I said, you know what, I can do this, more than just with people at our church, but, overall. And so that's really what led me into teaching, was just my love for just giving people more than what they had, because some people, they don't have everything laid out on a plate for them. They're figuring out life on their own. Their kids are too. And so in college, I was in a organization called NABA, which was the National Association of Black Accountants. And their motto was lift as you climb. And so as I, transcended into my adult years, I kept that motto of we should always be lifting as we are climbing so that other people have the same opportunities.
And if I can just probe you a little bit further on that, Chrystal, you talked when we met in person about some of the observations you had in the classroom, some of the gaps that you saw in the learning of students in high school mathematics. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So I taught algebra and geometry, algebra 2 and geometry. So typically my students are going to be anywhere between 15 and 17 years old. And, the common theme was that kids have really been just passed along for years, starting way back in elementary. And so now I have them, 10 years later, and they just lacked a lot of basic mathematics skills.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh my goodness, you've been passed along so long and no one said anything. But, I have 30 kids in a class. I have 6 classes. And I said, okay, I see how some kids really just fall through the cracks, because at the end of the day, as a teacher, I can't monitor 100, 150 plus students, as well as I could a smaller number. And so back then I said, I'm going to start a school one day, not knowing that I actually would start a school, but I just saw where there was a need where students really wanted to learn, but not all students fit into this box. Not every student could, stay on task long enough to actually comprehend information. And so because of just the, traditional school setting, if you don't get it, oh, well, we're just going to go on to the next topic and the next and the next. And I saw where so many kids, they were really grade levels behind. I mean, where you have to have a calculator to do 2 times 2. And so that's when I said, okay, something is wrong here. The teachers are stressed. The kids aren't getting it. Everyone's pointing the finger. There has to be a solution. And if we don't do it, the kids are just going to keep falling through the cracks.
Yeah.
And Joshua, you started to think a little bit more about the education of your own children. You have now 4 children, but in the
Yes.
beginning of 2020, before COVID shut down schools, you and Chrystal made the decision that you were going to kind of finish off the school year for your oldest, who I believe you said was finishing first grade at the time.
Yes.
Yes.
And he was at a private school. So you're going to finish up the year there and then shift over to homeschooling in the fall of 2020, and have that more personalized learning environment. Of course, you probably couldn't have predicted that the homeschooling experience would have come sooner than later. And
Right.
everyone really would have been thrust into homeschooling that spring. But tell us a little bit about why you decided to move from another traditional private school in your area into homeschooling back at that time. What was the catalyst for that?
Well, I think number one, as parents, we always look at making sure that we want the best education, and not only education, we want the best influence and environment for our children. And so looking at all the dynamics of the traditional school versus what we're able to actually give our children, we wanted to focus in on them personally. And that way we can focus on building, their character, building their conduct, building their communication, and making sure that it's congruent with our values and morals. And so, when we look at education as a whole, I always look at it holistically. I don't always look at it from one line or another. I always look at it holistically. Whole life skills, character skills, being honorable all around. And so making money, getting education to go make money is one thing, but having success in your family, having success in your marriage, having success in all of life, to me, that's full success. That's holistic education and mastery, understanding of learning. And so, yeah.
So Joshua, as you moved into homeschooling, again, slightly sooner than you had originally planned, but kind of full-time and committed in the fall of 2020, what did you sort of notice or discover as part of the kind of homeschooling experience with your own children? What did you find gratifying?
Number one, just having time with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
just able to be there, even as a pastor and as a teacher and as a coach and counselor, kids need time. They need time, and a lot of times we so busy we have to buy them off. We have to buy stuff for them. And the goal of every parent is to train their children. I believe the educational system is supposed to be a merger, be able to bring that merge between education and family, that commensurate merge there. But just time with them, they need their parents more than anything. And so we are the ultimate educators, going forward, but just really the time with them. You was going to say something.
Well, and we learned how, because we have 4 kids, right? All different personalities,
Yes.
all different types of learning. And so we learned how to be really innovative. Where we saw our son struggle in an area, we got creative. So we're like doing jumping jacks, like trying to teach him like clocks and, past and till and all the things that maybe, he wouldn't have got just kind of sitting down in the classroom. And so when we started just those really innovative learning techniques, we saw, wow. And other people started to learn. They're like, wow, your kids, they read so well. And it's like, yeah, well, because we're doing all kinds of things so that learning becomes personal to them. And they really developed a love of learning. And that's one thing that I saw in traditional school, where the kids really didn't have a love of learning. And I think it's because they just didn't have the time. No one spent the time to really teach them, and so many times we want to, stick a test in front of the child, not knowing that you have to develop them first. You have to develop a love of learning, this is how you study before we can put any type of test in front of them.
Absolutely. And I was actually I was labeled coming up. I don't think I've shared this ever. I was labeled coming up. So I was in, content mastery, special education. And, as I matured and really, once really I came over to Christ and started to understand some things, I share with my wife, I don't think there's a lot of gaps in understanding why people are behind, because really the desire wasn't built, and so looking at it from a place, like you just said, they're not motivated to be educated. If you motivate me to be educated, if my surroundings are not conducive to being successful, like you won't care about math, you won't care about science, you won't care about those things. But if you really build a desire in them and help them understand what the end goal of this is, what this is going to get them towards, and really be able to spend time there with that child. So that's what even homeschooling doing, it helps them to learn the value of why they're doing what they're doing. And so as I grow, and really right now I'm an advocate for helping people realize, is it really ADHD or they're just not passionate? Is it really a disability, or maybe you haven't found what they like? And then we put the education to the mastery of understanding where they are, not where, we're trying to bring them. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's such an important point, Joshua. I'm really glad that you shared your personal experience of kind of being put through the system and labeled. And it's really the opposite of what you've now created with Braveheart, which is this highly individualized, personalized education model. Chrystal, I think you told me that it's you bringing the education to the child, not the other way around. You're sort of finding out where they're at, and in terms of content, what are their strengths and weaknesses, and then adapting the curriculum accordingly so that they can close any gaps. And how did that come about? I mean, how did you go from homeschooling your own children? You had a newborn in the beginning of the 2020 academic year. How did it go from that experience to then saying, you know what, let's create a school?
So again, we just thought of all these really innovative things to do with our kids, and other people saw, wow, your 3.5-year-old, she was probably turning 4. She already knows small words, and she can read. Joshua at the time, who was at that time now 2nd grade, I mean, he's reading at a 4th grade level. And so people just saw, okay, how are your kids doing this? I know everyone knew that we took them out to homeschool, and they said, okay, how are you doing this? Can you do this for my child? Do you do tutoring? And so we just saw, okay, we have a whole school already, basically. How about we create a school? We teach them more morals, spiritual values, and the academics, just to the people in our community. And that's what we did. We just started with the people that said, hey, I love what you're doing. Can I join with you? And then it expounded from there.
And what have you seen so far in terms of the growth? So you opened in the fall of 2021 and moved into your current beautiful space last spring of 2022. So you're now about 1.5 years into this. What sort of growth or outcomes have you already noticed in some of the students that are in your microschool?
Oh, wow. So many. The one that I share often is where our first school year, we had a student 4th grade by age, but he was a 1st grader academically. Even this morning, I teach the kids math in the mornings. He's almost caught up to his 5th grade peers. And every time we do math, he says, gosh, this is just so easy. Can we do something else? It's like, you're actually getting it. And when his mom hears that, she's just floored. She's like, I cannot believe this is my child saying it. But not even academically, his confidence. Before, he was bullied, and, he knew that, okay, I don't understand what they're teaching me. And so to see him even from his level of confidence now, where he's like, this is easy. Oh yeah, let's go do our math. Let's do our science project. It's going to be great. To see a child become their own self, who they were called to be, is the most rewarding thing ever.
Yeah.
And we just started thinking, let's give kids spiritual, moral, academic excellence. But to see a child really come into this themselves and be confident, oh, it's on another level. Also, this week, we had a student come, 6th grader, and never really had good math skills. So we said, okay, let's back up a little bit. Let's fill in gaps. She is now enrolled in college for kids pre-algebra. And her mom said, I cannot believe she picked pre-algebra. I thought she was going to pick dance or something kind of fun. And she picked pre-algebra. And she was like, I thank you so much that she's confident, not only confident, but she can actually stay on par. Pre-algebra is something you don't take until, 8th grade. And she's a 6th grader. So what we see this over and over. And now that we're, ending our 2nd year, we can really do a lot of benchmarking to see, okay, where are the kids who started with us? Where are they now? Every single one of them, if they started at grade level, they're now working 1 or 2 grade levels ahead. If they started behind, they're now caught up and now going forward. It's the same thing over and over. So
Yeah.
now we can see like, no, it's really working. What we're doing is working. Yes, it's a lot of work. It's very individualized, but it's working. And
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that we haven't seen a whole lot of in the traditional school. We see the opposite. The child is kind of declining,
Yeah.
which is what we don't want to see. And, our students are, 50% of our student population come from single parent households. They are working class, middle class. I mean, we have parents that are working service-based jobs, so these are not very wealthy families. We have a diverse, set of parents, but for the most part, these are just very, someone would call normal people, but really value education and say, you know what, I want something different from my child. So I'm willing to sacrifice, I'm willing to volunteer. I'm willing to do whatever I can so that they can stay in the place that they're actually learning.
Yeah.
And they're actually enjoying it too. They're not like, oh man, I gotta go to school. It's like, okay, I could do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Joshua, I'll turn to you in a minute too. Chrystal, I know when we met a few weeks ago at your school, you mentioned one parent who was saying that they were sort of debating whether they should pay the tuition or their rent because their tuition at Braveheart is so important. It's such a priority. And of course, you said, please pay your rent. But affordability is a key issue, and certainly something that you think a lot about because it's something you hear time and again from families who say that the tuition is really the only barrier, that they would send their kids to Braveheart in a second if they could afford it. And yet Braveheart is less expensive than other traditional private schools in the area already, and still inaccessible to some families due to finances. And I know that your work, Joshua, with some of the students that you coach through basketball and in the community, you hear from those parents that they would love to attend, but again, affordability is a key issue. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, no, absolutely. One thing I love about my wife is more of the academic in the classroom teaching. I'm more of the character looking mastery of interpersonal skills, them knowing who they are, where they are, and assessing their emotional and their social. I didn't know that word was getting robbed by a lot of things that we learned this last week. Adding CRT and all that stuff to it. But knowing where the child is, number one, when they're coming out of their home life, assessing them and letting them know that they're supported, gives them the opportunity to start taking in a lot of the training and the academics when it comes to math, science, and the studies. But yes, teaching and making sure that they have honorable character, honorable conduct. And then honorable communication all around, all together to succeed. Is the goal for what we aim to do. And so, yeah.
And for, the tuition, like you said, people are really sacrificing, and from our perspective, it's a balance, right? We have to pay our teachers. We have to pay our teachers, but at the end of the day, we want the parents to be here. We want their kids to be here, but it's a huge sacrifice, and we speak to parents month after month that say, can I do anything else? So we're bartering, I can do social media for you. I can do, I can go and mow the grass, that's how much parents are invested, and so with school choice, it really does give the parents what they ultimately want at the end of the day. They're already doing it.
Yeah.
But this would be a huge relief financially. And even for us, our teachers, they took a huge pay cut leaving the public school system, but it's because they're really on board with our mission and our values. And one teacher said, I couldn't continue to teach in a place that I knew wasn't working. I couldn't do it. I can't stand in front of my students every single day knowing that a lot of them, they're just not going to make it.
Mm.
And that's really tough. And so she came over knowing that she was going to take a huge pay cut, but she's like, I know this is working. And the kids are actually learning and they're not going to fall through the cracks. So,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you were saying that you try to defray tuition costs in any way you can through bartering and having the parents involved in certain things. You've also received grant funding, small grant funding from the VELA Education Fund, which is the national philanthropic that helps to support non-traditional out-of-system microschools and similar innovative learning models. But there, it's still not enough to make Braveheart accessible to as many families that want it, even though, again, your tuition is much lower than other traditional private schools in the area. You're at around $7,000 per year. And the Texas legislature just introduced a school choice bill that would provide $8,000 to K-12 students throughout the state of Texas through an ESA bill. That you were part of promoting and supporting last week. You were able to go to give some congressional testimony in support of this bill, Senate Bill 8. I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about that experience of supporting the school choice bill and what that would mean for families who want to attend Braveheart, which comes in even below that ESA price tag.
The ESA bill, Senate Bill 8, it would be a total game changer for families. Our tuition is $7,000, so that leaves $1,000 for transportation to and from school, uniforms, books, supplies, pretty much anything they need, co-curriculars, tutoring. That would be huge. Again, so many parents want this model because they know their child is not doing the best in a traditional setting, but sometimes parents feel like they don't have options. Because finances, we all know inflation, over the past 2 years has skyrocketed. And so while they're managing their grocery bills and everything else, parents just say, there's no way I could afford this. So this would be a huge opportunity for parents and students to actually receive the education needed. And so last week we testified under one of the senators, and we had such amazing feedback. At the end of the day, people just didn't know schools like Braveheart existed. In their mind, they think that private schools are only for the ultra wealthy and tuition's $20,000 a year. But no, there are schools like us whose tuition is very low in comparison to some private schools, and that the kids are doing dynamic and it's individualized and parents are really in support. So the support that we received was great. Even the people that were against it, once we shared our story, they couldn't say anything. They were like, wow, keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. And it's really because they just didn't know. Yeah. They didn't know that things like this existed.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you add to that, Joshua? What was that experience like?
Oh, it was refreshing. It was refreshing. And no, absolutely. It was good to meet a lot of people and just hear, the conversations and hear all the things that, all the support, number one, and just see all the moms that out there, supporting and really pushing for this to go forward. And we just felt good being behind that and heading that and preferably it can go forward. So, yeah.
It's great. And hopefully that will pass. We've seen a lot of interest in education savings accounts and school choice bills across the country. There's a real momentum for enabling education funding to follow students so that families can decide where they want their children to go to school or how they want their children to be educated. And find the right fit for them, which, from what I've seen are increasingly these individualized models that are being built by entrepreneurs like you who really see the value in a more personalized curriculum, a more personalized education setting, and are seeing the outcomes, the incredible growth and success, both academically and as you mentioned, Joshua, spiritually, morally, in the case of Braveheart. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about that, Joshua. You talked about how that character development is a key part of your role in the school, and certainly the pastor of the church where the school is housed. You don't only, though, work with the students on that. One of the things I thought was really special about Braveheart is your partnership with parents. Yes. And really trying to work with them around peaceful parenting approaches, gentle parenting. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As we are really trying to educate the kids and really build them to the point that they need to be in their character, if we send them home and the parents don't have the environment to facilitate that development and facilitate that maturity, what's going to happen is the kid's going to go back to behaving and just doing the things that they shouldn't do. And so the goal is to make sure that the parent is prepared to learn learn to communicate to their child and learn to identify the things that's going on within their child. A lot of times, just understanding tools that can help them personally with the things that's going on in their lives, and understanding that they're the ultimate authority, they're the ultimate influence over their child. You know, every day their child is watching what they do. They're watching how they communicate. And so when they send them to school, a lot of times the child is going to act out whatever they're seeing and whatever they're getting at home. And so my goal is to make sure that parents are prepared to be able to keep the maturity, keep the training, keep the education that we are instilling in them when they get home. And so, yeah, it's really been a blessing, and the parents it's really been a great partnership, and they love it. The parents love the classes. They're engaging in the classes. They're asking a lot of questions, and we're learning together. And so it's been really good.
Chrystal, so not all of the families who attend the Braveheart Christian Academy attend your church, but some do. And you still have these parenting workshops frequently over Zoom so that all families can attend, although I imagine more in-person opportunities as well. There was a science fair that parents were invited to on the day that I visited. So lots of that kind of parent involvement. But what is your sense of that partnership with parents and the tools and techniques you're sharing with them?
I think it's very valuable. One, our comments that are frequently made is, wow, I didn't know I had to be involved as I am now. And typically, they're used to just dropping off their child at 8 o'clock, picking them up at 3 o'clock or whenever school ends, signing the report card, every, quarter or so. And so us holding the parents accountable and saying, no, like, you are very much a part of this education structure as the student and the teacher. And so for a lot of parents, it's kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, what did I sign up for? But once they see the result, not only in the student, but even in their lives, it's dynamic. And so a lot of times on the calls, parents are crying. They are really like, oh, wow, this is really what I need to do.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it comes down to, we want you to be involved. Yes, we want you to. And so having like open arms with, just as much as we want the student, we want you as the parent, it makes them say, you know what? Yes, I can do that. And it's empowering.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we've lost that, we have to empower the whole family. It's not just about the student, but it's the whole family unit and the whole family dynamic. When the whole family is successful,
Yes.
Now mom is confident, and now she can encourage. When we send homework home, oh, she's on it. We have one parent, she's like, I never made him do homework, but now he does everything, and he doesn't turn on any video game or anything until it is done. But she didn't know the value of it before.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's just holding them accountable, being very welcoming, and saying, hey, it's okay. We all make mistakes. Sometimes we just don't know. We made a mistake because we just didn't know what the right thing to do was. But giving them the empowerment, and going back to school choice, giving the parents power back. I think we've stripped away some of those parental rights when we're forced to say, hey, this is all the school that I can afford, my neighborhood school, here you go. But giving the power back to the parent, I think we're going to see more of our models, pop up across the state of Texas, and also parents having the same experience as our parents here.
Absolutely.
And what a gift that would be for more parents to feel empowered, to feel that sort of holistic view of the family, of the child, the kind of the collaboration between the school and the family, and just the profound impact that will have, not only in families, but in our larger communities. Joshua, you were going to add something there. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, just teaching them how to have relational equity with their children, and not just positional. And a lot of times parents, we've learned even in our own life how to be positional with our children. But if we can learn to have relationship with them and walk them through, just having dinner at the table, just, it can be the simplest thing. And when we see parents start taking those efforts to do that, we see the child come back totally different, and they're able to attain a lot of the information that they're learning in school. And so that parent dynamic is key.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So tell us a little bit about the details right now of Braveheart. How many students do you have? How many teachers? What are the age ranges? And then what's next for you? Where do you sort of see Braveheart going over the next year or two and beyond?
Yes, so we currently have 13 students ranging from pre-K 4 all the way through 6th grade. And so our goal is to add a grade level each year. So that way our oldest student, she can stay with us. And what we see is we have so many people in other areas of the Metroplex that say, wow, I really wish Braveheart was closer. You know, the DFW Metroplex, you know, it takes about an hour and a half to get from one end to the opposite end. So we want to expand. Something else on our list is formal accreditation. So normally you have to be in operation at least for a year. So this year we're going through accreditation to be formally, you know, recognized through the state of Texas as a public school. Which is huge.
As a private school. Yeah.
As a private school, I'm sorry, as a private school. And that's huge. So that is our big effort this year into next year, and to grow. You know, we want to serve as many students as we can.
Yeah.
That is the goal, is to bring this model to as many students and parents who really want this type of educational environment.
In our summer program also.
And
Yes. Oh, and our summer program. Yes. So our summer program is another big effort that we do. And we get kids from all over, not just the kids that attend our school. And it's all about academic retention. So typically you hear something called the summer slide, which is where, you know, kids, they say, see you later school in May or June. They come back in September or August, and they've kind of forgotten everything that they learned. And so in the summer, half of the school day is academic. The second half, it's all fun. We're going go-karting and swimming, so that the kids have a really good summer activities, but they're also catching up, closing academic achievement gaps, as well as getting ahead.
And a lot more students.
And a lot more students come in the summer too.
yeah, right. You're serving, I think you said, wasn't it closer to 50 students in the summer?
Total. Yes.
Which is great. And again, more of them would attend Braveheart full time if they could afford the $7,000, which, if the $8,000 ESA goes through, would be possible. And of course, you brought up accreditation. One of the caveats currently in the Texas bill is that in order to participate in the ESA program, private schools would have to be accredited. And of course, you mentioned some of these barriers to that for a new school like you, or some of these newer models, innovative models that are just appearing, you know, it'll take some time to get accredited. So kind of looking at ways to provide perhaps provisional accreditation or some exemptions for newer innovative schools would provide more of those opportunities for families to choose Braveheart if they wanted to going forward. And how many teachers currently at Braveheart?
We have 3 teachers. So we have a preschool teacher, we have a lower school teacher, which is grades 1 through 3, as well as upper school, which is 4, 5, and 6. And, you know, multi-level classrooms are great because it's not just one level, but you have students that will feed from each other really well. If a student is stuck, and let's say a teacher's working with another student, an older student will come over and say, you know what, I can help you with that. So it's so innovative how they work together. They're really learning from each other, and they're not afraid to, you know, it's building their confidence. So they're not afraid to ask, hey, can you help me with this? Because you're in the next grade, you know, higher than I am. So it's really dynamic.
Oh, it's so great. And you said earlier that you are able to recruit teachers from the public schools, that they are, even though making less money in your micro school, they appreciate the model, the mission, and that, again, that personalized learning in that individualized environment. So great to see that. As we wrap up, I wonder if you can share some advice for listeners and viewers who might be thinking about launching a micro school in their own communities. What advice do you have for budding education entrepreneurs?
Oh, wow. The road can seem like you're the only one on it, but it's so worth it. You know, when you see the students And again, it's not necessarily about the numbers. Of course, we want to serve as many as possible. But when you see even 1 or 2 students, that light bulb go off,
Yeah.
oh, it makes it all worth it. Because you've totally changed someone's life and the generation. Like their legacy is forever changed.
Yeah.
And that is what keeps us going every single day. Are there hard times? Absolutely. Are there times where we're like, okay, is this actually really working? But when you see those light bulbs go off in the kids, oh, it just makes you want to do everything over 10 times.
Yeah.
It's like, we can do this and we're going to get more students. So for those aspiring educational entrepreneurs, go for it.
Yeah.
If you have the idea, you have it for a reason. There are kids that are waiting for your school to open, waiting for your idea to become established. Go for it. Even if it gets hard. You know, a lot of times we expect things to be kind of peaches and cream, but it's more like rocky road. Just keep going. And eventually it'll turn into peaches and cream, but you have to start. If it just stays here, it just stays here and no one benefits from it. But the minute you get going and that traction goes, you're going to meet different people. You're going to make the right connections and you're going to get the students, and ultimately you're going to change someone's life forever.
And it's okay to learn as you go.
Yes.
There are things there. Of course, there's competencies that you need to get started, but it's okay to learn as you go. And so you won't know everything, but there are resources out there to help you, go forward. So no, absolutely.
And hire a qualified CPA, an accountant, right, Chrystal? I mean, that was right. You had the benefit of already being an entrepreneur, of understanding sort of general business strategies and the flow of business. I mean, what about for someone who might be, just working in a public school and deciding that they want to leave to be an education entrepreneur, who might not have that business knowledge, right? Like they've been an educator, not an entrepreneur their whole lives. What would you say to them?
I would say expand your network. We are a part of the Vela Education Fund, and that has been a huge resource for us. I mean, absolutely dynamic. And what we have found is that people are very willing to share information. How did you start? How did you do it? Can you give me a template for this? People are like, absolutely. So I would say start expanding your network. Join the Vela Education Fund. Just join different type of groups. Technology makes it very easy to find people now. So you can find people like us or anyone else on Facebook groups, and just starting getting around people, and you'll start to get the knowledge that you need. And again, people have been very willing. There is another school here in Plano called Campbell Christian Academy. And June Campbell and her husband started this program years ago. And she was a wealth of knowledge when we got started. And she just sat down and she spent hours with us. And she said, Chrystal, you have to do this. If God gave you the idea, do it. And she sat down for hours with us, and it was so valuable. And she didn't have to, but she just said, here, I can't serve all of them. Go ahead and you start your school. So people are very willing to share information.
That's what I found too, that there's a real sense of collaboration, not competition, among these emerging microschools and other innovative learning models. I think partly because there's just so much demand. I mean, there's so many families that want and need something new and different. And entrepreneurs like you are really stepping up to meet that demand and fill that gap. So if my listeners and viewers want to connect with you and learn more about Braveheart Christian Academy, what is the best way for them to do that?
The best way is go to our website. So it's braveheartacademy.org, and there's a contact page, and that'll come straight to us. And we'd love to connect with families or future entrepreneurs or anyone who just wants to learn more about us.
Yes.
Chrystal and Joshua Bernard, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.